I'd always felt like hiring was very important. And as I said earlier, generally, I felt like we'd hire good people for the most part. But this really drove home how important it was. And almost immediately within the first hiring season, we could see a difference. It absolutely transformed our school.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Authors on Mission podcast. So, picture this. You're the principal of a school, and you're about to make the most important decision of your tenure. Not the budget, not the curriculum, not even the strategic plan. You're about to hire someone who will shape young minds for decades to come. But most school leaders receive zero formal training on how to hire well. Now imagine you can learn from someone who's made those critical hiring decisions across 4 countries, 4 different educational systems, and 32 years of leadership experience. Someone who's discovered that everything we think we know about hiring might be backwards. Well, our guest today is Kelley Ridings, an award-winning school leader turned authorpreneur who's lived the international education dream across China, Mexico, South Korea, and the United States. After retiring from a career in 2024, Kelley didn't slow down but accelerated and became a writer, a consultant, and a global advocate. So he has some incredible books for us to talk about today, including his latest book, The Gift Hiring Method. So without further ado, Kelley, welcome to the show.
Well, hello, Danielle. Thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm glad to be here. Thank you. And for the nice introduction.
Of course, no, I always like having authors on of all different walks of life, but for you, I actually do have experience teaching as well. I'm currently a teacher too, so I know what it's like to be in the education system, and not the leadership aspect of you have. I'm just a teacher right now, but I know what it's like to face those decisions every day. So I think your book has definitely been something that a lot of people can learn from and be inspired by.
Well, there's never anything like just a teacher. It's part
That's
of what a school is about, of course, but it's a long process to enter the field and to be part of it, and so many parts are important, but certainly hiring is the core part of the whole thing because if we don't have the right people on board, then it's going to be hard for a school to carry out its mission. It's hard for you as a to carry out your job if your colleagues aren't top quality, and it's hard for the students obviously to learn and families to be satisfied if the right people aren't there. So it's just such a key part of what we do.
Hey, real quick before we jump back in, if you're loving what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So stick around because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and you're completely right. And it's great that your book kind of shines a light about on that. But before we get too much into the book itself, I think it's important for us to talk a little bit about your experience. I mean, you've had 32 years of teaching in different places. I guess I'm curious to know, what's the biggest mistake that you see educational leaders making, and how can they avoid it?
Well, I think that having been around the block a few times for a few school years, obviously, in 32 years, there's certainly some important things that educators do that help to impact positively what schools are doing, but it also there's some things that are not such good things, and I think that certainly from my perspective, I think for um, thinking about as people move into new roles and to new levels within the organization, that one of the biggest problems is that oftentimes people are given a position of leadership at different levels, whether it's as a grade level leader, subject leader, uh, vice principal, principal, and so on. And there isn't a lot of training and put into helping them to know what it is they need to do at each level of leadership. And so that's something that I've seen consistently throughout pretty much every school I've ever seen. I can't think of any that doesn't do that pretty much, and except for where I was working, of course. And so that's one of the things that was really important and missing, I think, is just not understanding what is involved with leadership and how to make a big difference in that. And so there's different skills at each level of leadership. And so how do we train people, whether people are brand new into the profession and just coming into the classroom, or how do they move into roles of leadership beyond that, which many people do, of course. And so training is valuable.
Understood. Right. And so I guess that kind of directly leads us into the gift hiring method in itself. Does that sort of directly relate to it? And was that developed by you yourself, or did it come from, I guess, some research that went into it? How did that develop?
Well, it was a process, the long process that helped to bring that about. And so, something that a lot of leaders face, regardless of pretty much what their backgrounds are, is that they have to hire people, and often, sometimes there's going to be somebody along the line who is going to be hired that just was not a good fit for the school. And that's a common experience that nearly every leader that I've ever talked with has some stories or stories that relate to that. And so I was no different. And so there were some occasions when most of the people, obviously, that I had helped to hire were fine and did a fine job and were very dedicated and worked really well. But occasionally there would be one or two that just didn't work out. And some of them very badly didn't work out. And so at one point, I finally just was thinking, okay, well, what is happening? And so, in leadership, we know that if something happens once or twice, okay, that's a one off. That might be just sort of luck or happenstance as to why that's taken place. But when it happens several times, then there's something else there. And so if there was something wrong with the process, and I realized that that was the case after one particular hire that just was not suitable at all. And I began thinking, all right, what's different? Well, we don't know what we don't know. And so that's when I began researching to figure out what might be some things. And that took me down a path of reading several books that were really valuable in helping to understand the importance of hiring. It made me realize that I had, as you said in the introduction, that there's no real formal training given to me that I'd had in my college preparation. I'm not saying anything against university preparation. It was fine, and it obviously carried me out very well in a long career in schools. But for that particular aspect, it was not at all adequate. And so I had to do a lot more research of my own to figure that out. And then it led me to several different books, like Good to Great, for example, is one of the classic books that helped me down that path. Also, another book that was really valuable was Hiring for Attitude. Was invaluable for me as well. And so these books help me to think about, okay, here's a way to look at hiring differently. And so then I began developing a process for our schools. These books, of course, were business books. Schools are not businesses, so I mean, they are a business in a way, but they're different in their mindset. And so figuring out how to uh, adapt that for school purposes was valuable and necessary to be able to do. And so over a course of years is how I began with this process and working with the colleagues in the school where I was. And it absolutely transformed our school. And that was when I, had this moment of realization that, how crucial. I'd always felt like hiring was very important. And as I said earlier, generally, I felt like we'd hired good people for the most part. But this really drove home how important it was. And almost immediately within the first hiring season, we could see a difference within our school.
That's incredible then that you're able to kind of implement it and right away within the first hiring season. There you go. There's that positive take back that you're able to get from it. Now, is this directly based off of the method then? And can you walk us through exactly what each part of the gift method stands for?
Sure. Well, the gift is referring to gathering information and facts thoughtfully with purpose.
Ah,
And so, what we look for in hiring is what I refer to as the gift. So, I'm putting that in air quotes. So, the gift is where you want to really determine and find out what a candidate's work attitude is. And that is the most crucial point in finding the right fit employee for the school and any organization, actually, not just a school, but any organization. And so, but to get to that authentic place where you can really figure out what their attitude is, you've got to be open and very aware of all the different parts of that hiring process and what the candidate is telling you. And so finding the gift is absolutely crucial. But obviously, a candidate wants a job, the employer wants to fill a job, and sometimes psychologically, those things are a little bit conflicting somewhat, and it closes us off to hearing what's really taking place in the interview. It can also close a candidate off to hearing what's taking place in an interview because candidates also can get focused on I want to get a job that they don't stop and listen to what the school and the recruiting leaders are telling them sometimes and giving them clues about what the school is like. So, same thing for the recruitment leader who is hiring, who doesn't hear what the candidate is really telling them. And so, we have to design a process and train our hiring leaders so that they understand every point of the process and what it's about, and to understand why we do it that way. And then it also involves setting up questions on the interview that is based on our work culture that we want to hire for. Doesn't mean that we're setting up for the work culture that we have, but the desired work culture that we're looking for. And we want to find people that match that. And then we've got to design questions that carefully fit in with that process or within that culture. And so doing that is going to be the crucial part of this strategy. Then, after designing those questions, testing them out, then we use them, train our hiring leaders on how to ask questions properly and how to follow the format, how to score the questions once they've been answered, and then go through the interview process. And then there's also follow up that we have to do as a school with candidates along the way. And what are the steps for that need to be thorough and carefully outlined for both the candidates and the school itself, so that we can find people and listen to what the candidates are telling us along each step of that hiring process. And then finally, the final part is just the onboarding. Once the person is actually hired, how do we bring them into the organization? How do we help them to be successful in being new employees and figuring out all the information they need to know in order to be a good employee and get along well as they integrate into our work culture?
Well, thank you so much for walking me through all of that. I see how it can be directly implemented in the schools. And I think what I love best about that is you said you have to ask the questions not based on the current climate you have at the school, but what you're hoping to achieve at the school, which I think is a very interesting way to frame it. And I can see how that might go a long way when interviewing, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and it
Um,
does, like I mentioned earlier, as soon as we did the first uh, hiring cycle, people in the school came up to me and they were like, wow, these people that you've hired, these are really different than before. And they noticed it. And I'd never came up to them and directly told them that we had changed our ways of interviewing and so on.
mhm.
But what that told me was gave me feedback that they noticed an attitude difference in the kind of people that were hired. And, they saw it within just the first few people that we hired, but then obviously every year when we hired using that method, it more and more people, so just exponentially increased. And so it changed completely the flavor of the work culture within our school to the way that we wanted to reach that desired work culture.
Understood. So clearly it helped, transformed, but at what point did you decide, you know what, I have to write this down and turn it into a book?
Well, as the process evolved over the years, and then I attended some conferences and was a presenter, and I presented about this topic. And it was one that I found that really resonated with a lot of hiring leaders who I was speaking with at those conferences. And I realized that they weren't necessarily using this kind of method themselves. And, but yet there was clearly a group of people who wanted this information and were interested in it. And so it was always kind of a book that was there in my mind. And when I wrote my first book, which is Teacher Lead Abroad, which is about hiring for people to go into international schools. And then I thought, okay, that book is for the mainly for teachers and for candidates who are looking for positions, teachers and school leaders who want to work in an international school. And then I thought, well, the companion book in a way is going to be the hiring process that is for the administrator and the recruitment leaders who are doing the hiring. And so that was where this book idea evolved from. And so I thought, okay, which one do I write first? Well, I ended up writing the Teacher Lead Abroad, and then I thought, okay, well, now it's time for the gift hiring method, and voila, there it is.
All right, well, there you go. So, like, now that you had it on paper, what was that process like? I mean, when I was looking at the materials, you describe writing as both delivering ideas with clarity and solving a puzzle with words. So, I guess, how do you balance the analytical and creative sides of writing? How do you find that right balance?
Well, that's actually one of the things that I really like about writing nonfiction and this type of book. I'm really a very I'm always interested in research, and I kind of my mind thinks that way. I'm very process oriented, and I'm very systems focused. And so the book just the process came about and grew organically in our school over a course of years. And then I began thinking about, okay, how can I deliver this in a book? And the school I never exactly referred to it as the gift hiring method, though I did refer to the gift all the time. I mean, that was something we crucially looked for when we were doing hiring. But then I realized, okay, this could actually be the kind of the link around the book. And then
Mhm.
I just started working my way through the process. Okay, what would we do to outline this and present it to the readers as to what this is about and how they can go about implementing it within their own school. And so it just helped me to clarify the process more and to put it into a more formalized sort of a structure that I'd already been using and was exceptionally familiar with and using it over a course of almost a decade. And so that it just grew from there. And I really enjoyed just going through the book and then just adjusting things along the way and ideas to clarify them, but also to just to outline what exactly that it meant, and so it worked pretty well because people that I work with who read that and they were like, "Oh, this is just like hearing you talk," because they could
Right.
see the everything, and these are the processes that they are using, so they know them exceptionally well, and it worked out really well.
Definitely. And that's great to know that you've had some positive reception that all kind of fell into place. That being said, it's more than just a book now. You've actually at this point built an entire business ecosystem around your books, courses, coaching, mentoring. So was this always part of your vision or did it evolve organically?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. So I'd always thought that once I had retired, which I did at the end of last school year, so that was 20, well, I guess 2 school years ago, 2024, when I retired in June, and I always thought, well, I was going to focus more on writing, and I'd hoped to do that, but I also began thinking about, okay, well, what's the next step that could happen with the books? Because
Mm.
writers aren't just writers, but there's other things, especially to the nonfiction um, genre, that there's other things that can go along with it. And so I began thinking about, could I develop a business that connects to my writing and uses the books as a basis to go into other things. So then I formed my own consulting company, which is EdgeNet Pro, and consulting. And I began developing, as you said, different things to go along with that. So I have some self-paced online courses. I have uh, groups of cohorts of teachers as well as leaders that come together on a regular basis, and then we can look at different problems that they're facing and situations and work together collaboratively in order to solve those problems, come up with ideas to talk them through. And then as well, I do some work with schools and helping them in developing systems for their schools, particularly focusing on hiring and helping them to develop so that they can use the method as well.
Oh, perfect. Well, I'm glad that it all kind of worked out and fell into place. Now that the book's out there, you're just transforming so many lives and really, helping hiring processes all over the place. So it's perfect stuff. And I'm wondering, do you happen to have any ideas for more books? I mean, you have these two written that now. Are there any more in the work bin right now that you're
Yep.
working on? Not at the moment.
Yes.
I
Yes.
always like to ask.
Well, I've got quite a few actually. So right now I'm in the middle of writing my third book, and this one is going to be a series that's connected to uh, mentorship of teachers and educators, and particularly thinking about, okay, if they're, especially as leaders, what are they going to face when they're coming into school? I'm really big on mentorship and leadership training. I think that's vital in any organization. And so I thought, well, here's a series of books that I could focus on different specific topics and have just a short book, but one that can give people seriously, um, some ideas where they could seriously focus a little bit on what they can do to impact that and impact their career development. And so it's not just for leaders, but teachers obviously they come into a school, they need help and support as well through mentorship, and many of them obviously are going to become leaders someday, and so this is helpful for them. So right now, my newest book that I'm working on is looking at the growth mindset and how the educational change process evolves in their work and what they're doing, and how they can use that growth mindset to impact their professional development and their growth as educators within their school and their career. So And then I'll have other books as well that'll deal on other topics that are connected to this mentorship process. So I'm hoping that that will be about a 6 book series when that comes about. So I'm working on that. I've got a few other books as well that I'm thinking about developing. Also, some things that I've already got materials with, and so I'm thinking about that. So I've got a few years down the line of works prepared.
Understood. Well, it's good to know those things are all on the in the future to come. We could all be on the lookout for it. So if people are interested in learning a little bit more and staying in touch, and if they're inspired by you and just want to, get some advice or even just to check out the books, whatever it might be, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Well, there's a couple of good ways. So I'm actively involved on LinkedIn, very actively involved there. So people can look me up on LinkedIn and connect to me there, but also through my website for edgenetpro.com. So edunetpro.com. And so I have all of my books that are listed there, as well as all the different things that I'm involved with my organization, my business. And then obviously on LinkedIn, I post regularly there. So I have lots of ideas about not just international schools and hiring, but about leadership and education in general. I post several times a week, and then I have also my innovative empowerment newsletter that I have on LinkedIn that comes out weekly there as well. And in fact, this is my this week will be, or next Monday actually, will be a 1 year anniversary for that. So uh, those are all good ways that people can get lots of information and can connect with me, and we can start conversations there.
Understood. Well, thank you. Everybody, we're going to put the links to that in our description box of the podcast today. So you can go ahead and click on over and get connected. And I appreciate that. So all this being said, do you have any last minute bits of advice to the audience out there today, be it writing tips or, any guidance in general that could help them as they continue on with their day after listening?
Well, I think that, with the writer, a lot of times people think about writing a book and they think, oh my gosh, they want to do it, but they also see that it's a big process and it's a massive thing. And it is. It takes a lot to do it, but it's also not as hard as they might think it is either. And it's just a matter of starting and writing and consistently contributing on a regular basis to that book. And it doesn't have to be a lot. It can just be writing just 500 words a day, or whatever the whatever somebody can do. If they just keep contributing to it, well, obviously at some point it's going to get done. And so it's like the joke that I'm not a joke teller and I'm not a comedian, but the only joke that I can tell is how do you go about eating an elephant? One bite at a time. And so I think the book is the same thing. Is you just, when you're writing it, you just do it one step at a time. And that leads into the hiring process also, because people might look at it and go, "Oh my gosh, you mean I have to look at that school's work culture or the business work culture, and I've got to change that and go through a whole hiring process and all the different parts of that and how that works," and it seems overwhelming. But just start it one step at a time. And that's what I try to work through with both the gift hiring method and my other book, The Teacher Lead Abroad. It's a step-by-step process in order to get to that end goal. But we keep the goal in mind, and that's what keeps us focused and moving forward. And it can and will happen. I absolutely guarantee that it makes a difference.
Well, awesome. I really appreciate that. And thank you so much. And I love that advice too, one small bite at a time. So no, this has been an incredible conversation, Kelly. I really appreciate you coming on and offering your guidance and your tips. It's been really eye-opening. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Danielle. I appreciate the chance to be here and have a chat with you about the book. And I appreciate your work, what you're doing, and appreciate your podcast.
Of course. And to all of our listeners, just remember that you can check out all Kelly's books and resources at the links that we're going to have in the description box today. And just remember that expertise without expression remains trapped, within one's existence until you write about it. So we understand now that writing isn't just about sharing knowledge, it's about multiplying the impact and creating lasting change. So until next time, keep writing, keep growing, and keep believing in the power of well-chosen words to transform industries and change lives. Have a great day, everybody.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.